This 17-year-old girl woke up in the middle of the Amazon rainforest in excruciating pain. Her last memory was being in free fall with the dense jungle canopy thousands of feet below her and getting closer very, very fast. But the question of how a plane carrying 92 people fell out of the sky, that was not on her mind. The only question now was how she was gonna survive. Which for her meant navigating the endless Amazon rainforest all by herself. Folks, this is the story of a hike I hope none of us will ever have to take. Because even if you were in the best shape of your life, no one would want to endure what Juliane Koepcke had to. We're talking about a teenage girl who should have died a dozen different ways. But in this moment, while she's laying on the ground of the Amazon rainforest all by herself, the only thing that mattered was what she would do next. Now, before we take off to the Amazon, it would be Amazoning. It was supposed to be amazing, not my best work. It would be amazing if you subscribe to the channel. That sounded way better in my head. Anyways, we're trying to make it to 1 million subscribers by the end of the year, and every subscriber helps us get closer to that goal. I really appreciate it. And so, without further ado, it's Christmas Eve of 1971. 17-year-old Juliane Koepcke, a German high school student, was boarding Lanza Flight 508 with her mother Maria from Lima to Pucallpa in Peru. Their destination? Well, that was a remote panguana research station where Juliana's father, Hans Wilhelm Koepcke, a zoologist, was waiting for them to celebrate the holidays together as a family. Juliana had just graduated from high school and was excited to join her family in the jungle. And this wasn't just because she missed her father. Juliana also wanted to go into animal studies, just like her dad. And so what better place to observe wild animals than in the Amazon jungle? Well, little did she know, she was about to have some very close animal encounters. You could even say that these encounters were too close. Juliana and her mother were flying with the airline Lanza, which, let's just say, didn't really have a great reputation. I mean, there's budget airlines, right? And then there's Lanza. I mean, just a year before all of this happened, a Lanza plane crashed due to engine failure, and in that case, the plane was actually over capacity with passengers. But Juliana and her mother's Christmas trip was pretty last minute, and so this was probably the only affordable option left for them. I mean, surely just one short, only an hour-long flight on Lanza would be safe, even if the airline was a little bit sketchy, right? There was a thunderstorm brewing in the area right as they planned to take off. But with the pressure of holiday travelers, you know how that can be, the flight crew decided to just risk it, which they immediately regretted. The turbulence on this plane was just unlike anything you can even imagine. The airplane was being tossed around like a toy. Overhead compartments were flying open. Passengers were literally holding onto their seats for dear life. And my apologies if you're watching this at the airport right now, especially if you're about to board a flight, because, I mean, yeah, this obviously sounds like a total nightmare. And then, 20 minutes into the flight, the absolute worst case scenario happened. A jolt of lightning struck the Lanza plane, the right wing caught on fire, and then the plane began to not just go down, but to straight up disintegrate. Like, I don't know how else to say this. The pilot's attempts to level the plane out only made things worse, as the left wing of the plane then snapped off, and of course it was now clear to everyone on board what was about to happen. One of the last things that Juliana remembered was her mother sitting in the seat next to her saying, quote, "Now it's all over." Juliana opened her eyes. Her vision was blurry as her glasses were now gone, but somehow Juliana had defied the odds and the laws of gravity and survived a 10,000 foot plunge from the sky all the way down to the ground. And as she looked around, a very horrifying reality was setting in. She was completely alone. There was no one else around her. None of the 92 souls on board were anywhere to be found, not even her mother, Maria, who again had been sitting right next to her. It occurred to Juliana that when the plane disintegrated midair, people, or bodies, were basically just scattered across the dense jungle. But I guess Lanza did at least one thing right, because Juliana was still somehow strapped into her seatbelt. She was sitting in a window seat, which was attached to the 2 other seats in her row. And this is a very important detail because if you think about it, one person in one chair would fall very fast, most likely, not making it past impact. But one person in a chair with 2 empty seats spinning above them creates some drag, which slowed the fall. But maybe I'm overthinking this because the bottom line is that Juliana got extremely lucky. So after she unbuckled herself, the first thing she did, of course, was look around for her mother. But with each little step that she took, she began to realize how much pain she was in. Her knee was badly sprained. She had a deep cut on her arm. She touched her collarbone and immediately crumbled to the ground. It was broken. And on top of all that, she was most definitely concussed, like severely concussed. Terrified, alone, and badly injured, Juliana decided to kind of just rest there in the crash site. During that sleepless night, she came to the conclusion that she just had to kind of put this tragedy out of her mind. She had to block it out. And also, despite how hard it was, she had to let go of the idea that she could search and somehow save her mom. Because she knew that any extra minute that she spent searching for her mom meant more time that she would have to spend in the unforgiving jungle. In her head, her badly concussed head, only one thought came through, which was, I need to get the hell out of this jungle. Despite somehow surviving the unsurvivable, a brutal, violent plane crash, the truth is that the real nightmare for Juliana was actually just getting started now. She was injured and stranded with no one around to help. And folks, I'm going to be honest, the details that are to come are a little bit squeamish and definitely disturbing. And so before we get there, I do just want to pause and take a deep breath. Ready? Okay, now that I've calmed things down a bit, I need to tell you about Drink Element.
This video is sponsored by Drink Element. I'm here in Big Cottonwood Canyon. If you know, you know. And as you might be able to tell, I'm pretty sweaty right now. I won't show you my back because it's disgusting, but I promise you it's extremely sweaty. I don't know if you can see that, but I sweat a lot. I just went for a trail run, and you've heard me say this before. When you sweat a lot, you need to replace your electrolytes, because if you don't, you're gonna get muscle cramps, you're gonna get fatigued. It's just not good. And so I've been looking forward to this since I left the trailhead. Right now, I'm gonna have some Element lemonade salt, because this stuff is unreal. It's so refreshing, dude. You don't even know. It just tastes like summer. It's like you're getting some lemonade from a lemonade stand on the side of the road in your neighborhood, except it's not full of sugar, and it's actually full of a bunch of good stuff that's really gonna help you when you're getting real sweaty like me. Oh, that's so refreshing, man. Wow. So I've got an idea for you. What you're gonna do is go to drinkelement.com/KyleHatesHiking. That's drinklmnt.com/KyleHatesHiking, and go buy yourself some lemonade salt right now. And when you do it through my link, you're gonna get a sample pack of 8 more Element drink mixes, a couple of each of their most popular flavors. That's gonna be thrown in with your order for no extra cost. You can't beat that. It's so refreshing, dude. Replace those electrolytes with Element. One more time, drinklmnt.com/KyleHatesHiking. Do it right now. All right, back to this crazy story.
When Juliana woke up the next morning, which actually happened to be Christmas morning, just to add insult to injury, she began to prepare for this unknown, treacherous hike that she had ahead of her. She started by checking where she was. She recognized the sounds of birds and bugs, and she figured out that she was somewhere in the Panguana jungle. Now, for most of us, myself at least, I can speak for myself here, this would feel like a death sentence, right? But for Juliana, it actually gave her a little bit of comfort. It almost felt like home, if you can believe that. But of course, this home just happened to also be home to 8-foot caimans, riverbed stingrays, piranhas, snakes, spiders, and billions of the most dangerous animal in the world, mosquitoes. The 17-year-old girl grabbed what she could from the crash site, which included a bag of candy, and she set out on the solo journey to safety, whatever that was going to entail. And she promised herself that if she could, she would also try to find her mom. Right away, Juliana's survival instincts kicked in. She knew that the jungle was a dangerous place, but she also knew a lot of its secrets. Her father, having spent so much time in the jungle, well, he taught her a lot of valuable lessons. Like, for instance, follow water downstream because it probably will lead to civilization. So she began to listen for water, and soon enough, she found a creek. And she knew the creek had to eventually feed into a stream, and lo and behold, that's exactly what she found. But there were still no signs of humans or civilization or any sort of safety, and so her only choice was to just follow this stream. The days were absolutely brutal, and I don't use that word lightly. Juliane stumbled through the foliage, battling dehydration, hunger, and the onslaught of all these biting insects. And to give her legs some rest, she would actually jump into the alligator-infested stream and just float waist deep down it, right? She knew that piranhas only attacked in the shallow, and so she stayed calm, even as the bloodthirsty fish swam by her legs. I mean, to me, that's crazy, but she was confident enough in herself that she just knew that this was what had to be done. Now, Juliane was facing a number of issues, but two of the biggest ones were, it was the wet season, which meant that her food options were extremely scarce. Not only did this make her trek super sloshy and just overall uncomfortable, but her ripped clothing started to fall apart, and this exposed her to the elements. During the night, it would absolutely dump rain, and this would sting her skin even worse than a lot of the mosquitoes did. Now, the second thing, so remember that gash on her arm I mentioned a few minutes ago when the plane crashed? Fair warning, well, that gash got a lot worse. Like, this is disgusting. So you've been warned, okay? I guess that because Juliane was spending so much time around swarms of bugs and then dipping into the water, her arm wound became the perfect environment for life to begin. And by life, I mean maggots. That's right. Maggots began to live inside of her open wound. So that was a problem. On her fourth day of hiking, Juliane was basically just in full adrenaline mode, right? Pushing through to get a little bit further each day. But all of a sudden, a sound that she hadn't heard before basically stopped her in her tracks. Vultures. She saw vultures circling above. She instantly knew that the vultures must have found something, and so she followed them to a part of the forest that looked like it had been raised down by something massive. She then walked up to a horrible sight. She found 3 pairs of feet sticking out from the ground, still wrapped inside of their plane seats. Folks, she was not hallucinating. I mean, she quickly realized that the bodies that were attached to these feet had been driven down into the soil and then half buried, right? And she also noticed that one of the bodies was that of a woman. She immediately began to assume the worst. I mean, you know where I'm going with this. Could this possibly be the body of her mother? And so, heart pounding, Juliane took off the woman's shoes in order to examine her nail polish. I mean, she knew exactly what her mother's toes, her nail polish would look like, right? I mean, can you just imagine how she probably felt in this moment? Like, this is the morbid moment of truth, you could say. But thankfully, this was not her mother, which probably brought her some fleeting comfort, but still, I mean, at this point, she must have known that the odds of her mother's survival were extremely low, and there wasn't anything else she could do, right? She had to just keep moving. The days grew longer, and Juliane grew hungrier. She had run out of candy long before this point, and the dirty stream water wasn't really safe enough to drink in large quantities, or probably at all, but what choice did she have? And to make things worse, she could actually hear the search planes above the thick canopy kind of humming around, almost like they were taunting her. She knew that she couldn't really do anything to alert them, right? And even those planes didn't really last, because after day 7, things went quiet. At that point, they had called off the search, and Juliane was truly now all on her own. By day 10, she was really struggling. She was starving, she was getting sick, and her bug-infested arm was just getting worse. I mean, it was in serious trouble now. She was getting desperate for any relief, but by her rough calculations, she felt like she couldn't have been too far from civilization. And just as she was preparing for another night out in the cold rain, she stumbled into a very small sign of hope. She found this tiny little human-made hut with a palm leaf roof. She cracked open the door, hoping to find, maybe a person in there, or at the very least some food, but unfortunately, neither one of those things was inside the hut. But what she did find was a small can of petrol oil and a shelter for the night, which is better than nothing, right? Now, some of you might be thinking that she would have had no use for that oil, right? I mean, maybe she could start a fire, but believe it or not, there was actually something else that she realized she could do with this oil. So Juliana remembered something that she had learned from her dad. When their family dog's wound had become infested with maggots like hers now was. And you might see where I'm going with this, you might not. I'm just gonna say it. She poured the gasoline into her open wound and basically just suffocated as many of the bugs that had taken up residency in there as she possibly could. Can you imagine how much that would sting? Like, so after doing this, she decides it's time to try to fall asleep in the hut. But at this point, her living nightmare, or her nightmares, reached a breaking point, we'll say. She was in pain. Once again, she's starving, and the gasoline that she had poured into that bug-infested wound hadn't quite finished off the job. And of course, all these factors combined, making it pretty much impossible to sleep. The next morning, as she still sat in this hut, she began to hear the sounds of animals. And I should specify, these weren't just little, chipmunks or frogs. These were big animals nearby. And at this point, she's basically ready to give up. And so she was probably just thinking, whatever these animals are, like, they can just have me. Like, I'm done. I don't even care. But as the animal sounds approached and got louder, it actually hit her that these weren't actually animals. Well, I guess technically they were. But no, they were humans. Juliana ran out of the shelter, and there, right in front of her, were 3 Peruvian lumberjacks. Her, albeit unintentional, rescuers. The first living people that she had seen in 11 days. As soon as she saw these men, she knew that her nightmare was finally over. Against all the odds, Juliana had survived a plane crash and 11 days surviving in the jungle all by herself. The men put Juliana in a canoe and then took her down the river to a small missionary where she would eventually be airlifted to a hospital. And as they went down the river, the local villagers couldn't help themselves but just to stare at her, right? Let's just say that Juliana was a pretty strange sight to them. I mean, she was this skinny blonde girl with tattered clothes and dirt all over her. But more than that, her eyes were so bloodshot and swollen that the locals could have sworn that they had seen a forest demon. Later, as she began to recover at the hospital, the only thing on Juliana's mind was her mother. I'm sure by now she realized the chances that her mother had survived were very slim, but nonetheless, she was still holding on to some distant hope that maybe, just maybe, her mother had survived the unsurvivable just like she did. But folks, it was worse than Juliana could have ever imagined. She did finally learn the tragic fate of her mother, and also learned that every single other person aboard Lanza Flight 508 had perished. Juliana was the only survivor of the crash. It is believed that 14 other people survived initially after landing in different parts of the jungle, but we'll never know about what they experienced or how long they lived before eventually giving in to the Amazon's will. Incredibly, just a week or so after she was rescued, Juliana volunteered to go out with the search parties in order to find more bodies. But she did quickly realize just how traumatized she was with survivor's guilt and, of course, with the images that she had come across during the ordeal. I mean, I've said this before, but don't forget, this is a 17-year-old girl who had just graduated from high school and was anticipating spending Christmas with her parents doing what they all loved. And so Juliana returned to Germany to figure things out and to try to put together a normal life after going through this just insane experience. Now, to be the sole survivor of anything creates a lot of pressure for what to do with the rest of your life. And I mention that because I think it's just worth celebrating the fact that, by all accounts, Juliana went on to become an amazing woman. She studied biology and went on to be one of the world's leading experts on bats. Then later in life, she became the director of the Panguana Research Station, taking over the role from her dad. And in 2011, she wrote an award-winning book about her life. She's now around 70 years old and seemingly still doing great. Now, there is one last thing I want to tell you about Juliana's story. And this is actually pretty cool because I'm someone who's maybe like a little morbidly fascinated in the concept of like visiting the sites where these kinds of stories happen, right? So in 1998, a documentary came out directed by Werner Herzog called Wings of Hope. Now, Werner was actually supposed to be on the very same flight that Juliana took, but he had some last minute change in plans. And thank God he did, because he would go on to direct some awesome movies. But this one is really special because the director decided to follow Juliana back to Peru and retrace her steps of survival. And so, folks, this is all on film. And I've even got some stills to show you from it right here. In this one, Juliana is sitting next to the row of airplane chairs that she landed with at the first crash site. And here, Juliana is standing kind of just chilling in the middle of the stream with piranhas all around her. And this last one is particularly amazing. This is actually her meeting one of the lumberjacks who found her on the final day of her trek. I'd highly recommend watching the documentary. It adds some cool details to what I told you about in this video. And folks, let me know in the comments if there are other stories like Juliana's out there, because to me, I don't know, it's different than a lot of the stories on this channel, and it's one of the most epic life or death stories I've ever come across. I mean, from 10,000 feet in the sky to 11 days of survival in the Amazon, it's just incredible. YouTube seems to think that you'll enjoy watching this video next, and so give it a click. And if you're listening somewhere else other than YouTube, be sure to give this video a 5-star review. That would help us very, very much. I appreciate all of you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.